Hi, everybody. Okay, it's Elizabeth Cronus McLaughlin. It's Resistance Live for the 27th of September. I'm really sick today, so I want to apologize. I do not look my best. I do not feel my best. I'm kind of like under the weather, and I've been training all morning online, and I'm wiped out. So thank you all for your patience today. I also want to let all of you know, while everybody's logging on, that we will be back to regular time starting Monday for the foreseeable future. I don't have any plans at the moment that are going to impact the time of the broadcast. So these last 2 weeks have been really crazy, as you all know, with my day job work schedule. So just many thanks for your patience while we've been kind of moving through this. And it's another crazy day in Trump land. It's another Friday in Trump land. And things are wild. So I have another massive list of things to discuss today related to impeachment and the like. And again, I'm going to give you all a couple, just like a little bit longer to log in, because those numbers are going to tick up pretty quickly. But I want to thank you all for being here, and also let you know that as we are moving forward, I know some of you have really liked this 12 o'clock time the last 2 days. I want to thank you for your feedback on that, but we're sticking with 9 a.m. Pacific. And you can all follow me on Twitter throughout the day if you want ongoing commentary while I'm working the day job at the same time. So thank you again for your patience, and once again, sorry for being so sick. But this is where we are. This is where he is. All right. So we're going to start today on Bill Barr, because we had a lot of questions about Bill Barr overnight. So I want to say a couple of things about this. First of all, Bill Barr can be impeached, and we've talked about this quite a bit. Any nominated official in the executive branch of the government can be impeached. What seems very apparent, we talked about this on yesterday's broadcast, is that Bill Barr is very dramatically implicated in the current allegations with regard to Ukraine. He's also very dramatically engaged in the cover-up. And again, we talked yesterday quite a bit about the acting DNI going to the DOJ with a complaint that involved the DOJ, and the fact that Bill Barr is not recused, that Bill Barr was mentioned in Trump's call with Zelensky, that is at the root of some of these allegations, not the totality of them, but at the root of some of them. And it is absolutely the case that Bill Barr can be impeached for criminal activity or anything else that falls within the scope of treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors. Some of you asked as well, can he be impeached simultaneously with the president or the vice president? The answer to that is yes. They will be different sets of articles of impeachment, but there's nothing to stop anyone from doing all of this at the same time. So that, by the way, is key to one other issue that I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is the timing of everything that's happening with regard to impeachment, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. A lot of information that, by the way, I just want to mention is poor strategy. I think this is the difference between those of us who are lawyers, and particularly trial lawyers, opining on this stuff, and other political commentators who maybe are not as familiar with the legal ramifications and consequences of proceeding in a particular way. So give me a second, we'll get to that. One of the other issues related to Bill Barr that a number of you asked about was this issue about how can any of these people be prosecuted if Bill Barr is at the head of DOJ? Well, I want to remind you all that there are state investigations ongoing right now. I'm plugging in my laptop so I don't run out of juice. At the New York State Attorney General's office, and also with the district attorney for the city of New York. There are ways in which the president could be prosecuted under New York law, not necessarily related to these allegations, but related to other impeachable offenses. But the concern about the fact that Bill Barr is in charge of the DOJ already under Barr has taken positions that are positive to Trump and adverse to the rule of law, does raise concerns about whether or not he can be prosecuted effectively under federal law by a U.S. attorney under Bill Barr's supervision as the Attorney General, as long as Barr is still in office. And this is one of the reasons why Bill Barr either needs to recuse himself or resign or be impeached. I'll just tell you, I think there are indications here that Bill Barr was misleading in all the way back to his confirmation hearings. There's obvious indications here that he's engaged in this conspiracy, this criminal course of conduct with regard to Ukraine, and he should be removed. Those concerns are legitimate, and I think until he is removed, and we have a wholesale cleaning of house at the senior levels of the DOJ, it's going to be very hard to effectively prosecute the president or any of his people. So again, I just want to validate that that's a concern, and it's yet another reason to push for the impeachment of the AG. Okay. One of the big last night is that Nancy Pelosi has charged Adam Schiff with taking over the investigation for impeachment purposes through his role as the chairman of House Intelligence. Some of you have asked how this intersects with House Judiciary. This is how it works. Basically, House Intel is going to take responsibility for the investigation, quote unquote, as it stands. The expectation would then be that House Intel would convey articles of impeachment to House Judiciary. House Judiciary would vote those to the floor of the House. And then there would be a full vote by the House of Representatives on whether or not to impeach the president. One thing to keep in mind here is that while impeachment ordinarily originates in House Judiciary, it doesn't have to start there. And also one thing to keep in mind here is that obviously, as Pelosi announced when she announced the kind of like formal impeachment proceedings earlier this week, other information could be filtered into articles of impeachment concerning other investigations. Now, that brings me to a really key issue with where we find ourselves right now. And this is the issue that I alluded to a few minutes ago with regard to strategy. So let me say this. I happen to believe, as I've said several times this week on this broadcast, that there is no reason to not impeach the president right now with regard to Ukraine. There are some non-lawyer types out there, some very big name political pundits who are advocating for waiting and throwing the whole kitchen sink at the president to see what sticks. I personally will tell you that from a trial lawyer's perspective, and I'm happy to say that Lawrence Tribe, the fabulous Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe, agrees with me this morning that leading with this charge of Ukraine, which is easy to understand, where the president's already confessed, where the evidence is locked down obvious, and where it's easily understood by the American people, is probably the most effective way to impeach this president. Now, I want to remind you all, assuming, of course, that he doesn't like resign in exchange for a pardon or something crazy like that, he can be prosecuted for any other impeachable offense once he's no longer in office. My perspective on this is that because this is the easiest count, because it does not stop here. I want to remind you all of this. It's not like you only get one article of impeachment per president. You could do an easy article of impeachment on Ukraine or several on Ukraine and then follow it up with 25 more on other issues. There's nothing to prevent that either. Because what we're really dealing with here, and those of you who have been watching since the beginning know I've talked about this a lot, that impeachment is a political as well as a legal matter. Need to understand that from the perspective of the American public, the pressure that may be levied against the president to resign, the evidence as it would be submitted in front of the Senate, and the urgency of where we are right now with regard to the president's lunacy, trying not to be pejorative about it, his narcissistic personality disorder, how unhinged he is right now. I'll remind you all, he threatened yesterday to kill the whistleblower. It is incredibly important to move at a rapid speed right now with the best possible case that we have. So I am not in the camp that says, oh, it would be such a horrible mistake to only proceed with one. My biggest concern right now is removing him from power. I think that the easiest way to get him out of power right now is with this situation with Ukraine, because it's so obvious, because he's confessed, because the evidence is good, and because people understand it. And then things can be added on later if they need to be, and it's not like he's going to be off the hook for anything else. I will tell you that I think the people that are advocating for all of it at once are doing it either from a position of fear or from a position of vengeance. My perspective on this, again, I'm putting on my trial lawyer hat here, but my perspective on this is that the ultimate aim is what the focus has to be. And my ultimate aim is to get this president out of the Oval and away from the nuclear arsenal and away from the seat of power where he's able to harm and kill people. And that, to me, especially given where we are, especially given the threats that he's levied and how unhinged he has been on Twitter in the last 24 hours. I mean, the thing with the apostrophe is still driving me a little nuts as an English major. But that's the tiniest little implication of how far off the rails he is right now. We have to get him out of office. And I will tell you as well, that the interesting thing about these allegations with regard to Ukraine is there are serious cracks in the GOP wall that are showing themselves now. 2 GOP governors, albeit they don't have a vote in impeachment, but they came out yesterday in favor of impeachment. We now have a number of other Republican representatives, as well as some squeaky wheels inside the Senate in the GOP that are demonstrating that they're not circling the wagons around this president right now. Even the whole list of senators who were asked yesterday for comment from the GOP, they said they didn't read it or that they had read it and it was troubling. There's not a single GOP senator right now who's coming to the defense of the president, save Lindsey Graham. And that in and of itself should be a sign of where we are. And many people have been issuing the reminders this morning that Nixon wasn't impeached until his own Republican Party flipped, and they flipped very fast at the time that they flipped, and all of a sudden it was over. So we also need to recognize that if one Republican senator comes out in favor of impeachment, that could open the door to many others. And of course, we had this comment yesterday from Jeff Flake, albeit no longer in the Senate, stating that he thought that if there was a private vote where senators didn't have to put their name forward, and we can have lots of commentary about the bravery of this position right now or lack thereof, but that if there was a private vote, 35 senators from the GOP would vote to impeach him. So the where we need to get to between now and then is the bravery of one or two who are willing to step forward and put country over party. And we'll be in a position to impeach him. Do I think that he's going to be impeached for the payoff to Stormy Daniels successfully in front of the Senate? No, I don't actually. And I don't think that a number of the other impeachable offenses that he's engaged in are going to carry this much weight. Auctioning off the democratic process, extorting a foreign government to destroy the 2020 presidential election is an issue that is undefensible. It's indefensible by the GOP. So I am much less concerned at this moment in time about, throwing the whole kitchen sink at the wall and seeing what sticks than I am about actually removing him from office. So that brings us to the issue of timing, because there's been a lot of debate about timing here, about the 2-week recess, et cetera, et cetera. Adam Schiff said yesterday that the Intel Committee from the House is going to work through this break. That, by the way, is very important. And there's no way, by the way, if they were taking the recess, that they would be hinting at an impeachment hearing next week, let alone a vote, which is actually what Schiff is talking about. He's indicated now, as of this morning on CNN, that there may very well be an impeachment hearing as soon as next week. Again, I am in favor of them moving as quickly as possible. I talked a lot about this yesterday on the broadcast, that this president is currently painted into a corner. And that, given his narcissistic personality disorder and his antisocial tendencies, is an incredibly dangerous position for the country to be in with him at the helm. So speed is really is one of the key factors here to moving ahead. And that also, by the way, weighs in favor, in my book, of impeaching him on Ukraine and leaving everything else for completion if necessary. That's that kind of summary of the process. But, again, this is going to move fairly speedy. Pelosi has indicated a vote before Thanksgiving. I think it's going to be way sooner than that. And I think the more unhinged she gets, we had an admission this morning out of the White House that they did, in fact, transfer the record of this call with Zelensky to a private server, and that it was not the first time that they had done something like that. That also, by the way, is an admission of a crime. It's an admission of a cover-up of obstruction of justice, because they knew that what they were doing was illegal. So there are layers and layers and layers here now of what's being uncovered with regard to Ukraine that is utterly damning. There's literally no way to defend it. And the faster we move, the safer we're all going to be. I think it's got to be fast. I think it's got to be specific. I think it's got to be understandable, detailed, and impossible to vote against without a political consequence for the GOP. And the Ukraine situation meets all of those criteria. All right. We had some questions about the whistleblower safety, following up on the New York Times article yesterday and everything else going along with it. Let me just tell you this. He's got some very good lawyers working on his behalf. We know who those lawyers are. My expectation is that they've got him some kind of private security. The FBI is not going to do its job here of protecting this potential witness. We know that already. The FBI is potentially implicated in all of this, given that they're under the purview of the DOJ. But my expectation is that, his lawyers are doing what they need to do to make sure he's protected. So that doesn't mean that, the right person with the right poison or something like that couldn't be whistleblowers without security. And I think we probably all ought to just step back a notch on that and assume that his lawyers are doing the right thing for him. Okay, the president has been fundraising off of impeachment. I will just tell you that I don't know what else we would have expected, because he'll griff off of anything. Do I think that there's something shocking or horrifying about how much money they've raised since impeachment was announced? No. His base is a cult. We've talked about that a lot on this broadcast. We've talked about the fact that there's at least 20 to 25% of the population that is susceptible to authoritarian personalities under the basic studies that are done on psychological vulnerability to autocrats. And those people are going to keep supporting him no matter what he does. I mean, literally, he's right about one thing. there is a certain percentage of the population that even if he shot someone on Fifth Avenue would still contribute to his reelection campaign. There's nothing, at least not at this point. I mean, he may be in violation of election laws in terms of how he's using that money, but while he's running for reelection, he can still raise money off it for any reason whatsoever, as long as he's using it within the purview of the election regulations. So again, it may be horrifying, it may be shocking. I do not take it as an indication, however, that he can't be impeached. And I will remind you all that late yesterday afternoon, we got a poll that for the first time showed that a plurality of Americans, nearly more Americans than not, and nearly a majority of Americans now favor impeachment of this president as soon as possible. So, again, you got to take the tea leaves where you see them. You got to read them all the right way. And remember that some of these people are lost. There were people who supported Nixon until the day he left office. There were people who supported Hitler until the day he killed himself. So, we don't have to win everybody over in order to get this president out of office. And we should focus on what's happening that's positive in this front, support those who are doing it, and worry less about the individuals who are so lost to the cult that they can't see justice or criminality or the good of the nation. All right. Many of you have had concerns about this server, and I will just say what I said this morning on Twitter. The universe has a great sense of humor that what may now take the president down as a part of this cover-up and crime spree is a private server onto which they've transferred documents. So some of you may have missed this, but Adam Schiff announced yesterday as well that he has issued a preservation order. That preservation order extends. Well, let me back up. Many of you may not know what a preservation order is. So one of the things that happens at the start of litigation, we've talked about this before on the broadcast, is that parties will send notices to one another asking them to preserve the documentary evidence. Courts can also issue preservation orders saying, do not destroy any evidence relevant to this particular matter. And often those preservation notices or orders, I happen to have written these before when I was litigating big cases, are extremely specific. Here's the things we're asking you to preserve: emails, servers, backup tapes, blah, 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 blah. Adam Schiff has issued a preservation order. In fact, issued a preservation order before impeachment was announced as a formal inquiry to the White House to preserve this material. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if they destroy it, if they set fire to that server, the consequences will be dire. That in and of itself will be another count of obstruction of justice and another article of impeachment. The destruction of evidence in this way can be evidence of guilt, can be taken as an inference of guilt. And my expectation is that unless they are profoundly stupid and criminal, which of course they are, they're not going to destroy that server. The one thing I will say as well that bodes in favor of the preservation of that evidence is that we know from the report that issued yesterday, from the complaint, the whistleblower complaint that was released yesterday morning, that there are multiple White House officials who are witnesses to all of this, who have spoken to the whistleblower and have raised concerns about the use of this private server, both in this instance and in the past for other reasons. I'd say be greater than 50% confident that they will not destroy the server because the consequences would be extremely dire. They're also open to all of those people, by the way, up to criminal prosecution as well. So, again, I understand the concern. This is not a situation, as I've said repeatedly since 2017, where, you can take a paper document and stick it through a shredder and it's gone. The other thing to remember here is that these servers, even the ones that are private, may likely have a backup tape, especially because they were apparently administered by some intelligence officers to some extent. So I'm much less worried about the destruction of evidence here than I would have been, say, 30 years ago. All right. Kamala Harris this morning called for Rudy Giuliani's disbarment. That, as I said on Twitter this morning, is a no-brainer. He should not have a law license anymore. If he's perpetrating crimes with the president of the United States, he should not be a licensed attorney. He did give another absolutely unhinged interview last night on Laura Ingraham on Fox, where he held up all this, stuff implicating the State Department in this crime spree, in this conspiracy, and also made some really wild statements to The Atlantic yesterday, as we mentioned, that seem to indicate that he's as unhinged as anyone. The one thing that I will say about this is that the good news about Rudy is that it looks like he's going to take everybody down with him. If Rudy goes down, he's taking Pompeo and the State Department and the president and the vice president and the attorney general and the acting DNI and anyone else involved in this down with the ship. So I know it's impossible to watch him without getting infuriated or horrified. or sick to your stomach. But the good news about it from a larger scale strategic means is that every single time he goes on the air, he implicates someone in this. He is not acting all the other people who gave him permission to do it from State Department. So, we have to remember that Rudy does nothing better than implicate people in crimes right now. And that is a reason for him to lose his law license, and also a reason why it's actually a good thing that he's going on national media and talking smack about all of this. All right. Last bit of breaking news in the last 24 hours, which is very significant, is that there is a new Senate report that came out this morning that is 77 pages long that reaches the conclusion that the NRA was a Russian asset during the 2016 election. Those of you who have been watching the broadcast for quite some time will not be surprised by this. We've talked at great length about the role of Maria Butina and her boyfriend and the NRA and torsion and everything else going on with funneling money through the NRA from the Russians to Republican candidates. This conclusion is not a surprise. I will say, however, that the fact that there is a 77-page report from the Senate after an investigation that reaches that conclusion is significant. And the NRA has been, as you all know, in extreme turmoil for the last few months, since Oliver North quit, since there have been implications of financial fraud concerning Wayne LaPierre and his suits and his private jets and everything else going along, his multiple houses, everything else going along with that. The fact that they were acting as a Russian agent may also implicate their tax status. So there's a lot more to learn from all of that, but we're watching all of these things decompensate in real time. Across the pond, I would be remiss if I did not neglect that there are calls going on right now for Boris Johnson's resignation as a result of him using the name of a murdered MP as a justification for Brexit. There was a huge Prime Minister's questions over the last couple of days that really went to town on him. He's getting excoriated in the press. And as I said earlier this week, I'll just say it again, I would love to see a double resignation here at the same time because it would completely undermine Putin's agenda in terms of Western democracy. And then we just need a new resolution on Brexit and Nancy Pelosi or someone else as president. Not Pence. So that's where we stand for today. Once again, it's Friday in Trump land. The news has been breaking so fast and furious on all of this that we are nowhere near done for today. I can basically confirm that. What I will be looking for going into next week is the results of what House Intel is going to be up to during this recess. I will remind you all that your support of people who are ongoing participants in the impeachment investigation is critical. There's nothing wrong with calling Adam Schiff's office and thanking him for what he did yesterday, for what he's doing now. He is incredibly measured and steady in the way that he's proceeding, and that's a good thing. And I will add, when you all know this, because this is what we did during the summer recess, showing up at local offices of your congresspeople, your senators, while there is a break is a very effective tool of activism to get your local officials, rather your representatives and your senators, when they are local to you, to listen to your perspectives. So if you're looking for something to do over the next 2 weeks, showing up, sitting down, speaking to staffers, conveying your desire for impeachment, supporting those who have already come out in favor of it would be a very good thing. And I will also just mention that as of this morning, there are only 10 Democrats left in the House who are not in support of impeachment. 10. We are at 225 right now. And there are a couple of, like I said, a couple of Republican reps who are leaning in that direction very plainly, including Will Hurd. Let's keep the pressure on. Let's keep making our phone calls. Let's make sure that we are continuing to advocate as far as possible. And as I mentioned yesterday, I also really want you guys to be taking public stands, disabling disinformation campaigns about all of this, and doing it in the most effective way that you can with your friends, your neighbors, with anybody else who needs convincing. Because the reality of this is that this president needs to be gone as quickly as possible, given where we find ourselves right now. And the more public pressure that is levied, the more likely it is to happen within the next few days, if not few weeks. Okay? So that's it for today. Thank you all for your patience this week with all my crazy work schedule. Next week, we are back to regular time, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, all 5 days of the week. So I will see you then. And please do your best, by the way, to just take a little bit of a break this weekend. I myself was in high burnout mode by the time I went to bed at 10 o'clock last night, just from looking at this stuff all day long. Please remember to take care of yourselves. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Even if he's impeached by Monday, we've got a lot of work to do, and we are so far from done. And we still don't know how this is all going to devolve from the standpoint of prosecutions, potential pardons, Pence potentially, a new vice president, President Pelosi, and anything else that is likely in the chain of potential outcomes here. All right. So take care of yourselves. Lots of love to all of you. Thank you all, as always, for your support. And I will talk to all of you on Monday. Thanks.